All right, welcome everybody. Again, my name is Generic Holmes with the Shriver Center. We're gonna do some more formal introductions in just a moment, but want to just take a moment to welcome you to our RJI 2021 open house. Glad that you all are potentially interested in applying this year, and hope that I see your names move from our registrant list to our list of applicants. Moving ahead, just want to kind of share a snapshot of how we're going to spend our time together today. We're going to again start with some introductions all around. We want to get to know you a little bit and understand what you are hoping to get out of this session. We are going to share a little bit more about the Institute, our goals and structure, and a little bit of a few guidelines, I would say, for equity team initiatives. And then we will hear from two RJI alumni about their experience in the Institute and their equity team initiatives. And then we will wrap with a bit of a Q&A. And with that, we're gonna start our introductions. Let me stop sharing. And I am actually going to start first since I'm already talking, but I'm going to allow all of my colleagues at the Shriver Center to unmute and share their name, title, org, and where we're all dialing in from. So, hey everybody. Again, my name is Generic Holmes. I'm the Associate Director of the Shriver Center. Been here about 5 years, and I work from my home in Brooklyn, New York. I will pivot to Kim, since Kim, I can see you on my screen.
All right, so Generic is the Associate Director of the Institute. You said the Shriver Center.
Oh,
but it's fine. They understood what you meant. My name is Kimberly Merchant. I'm the Director of the Racial Justice Institute and Network here at the Shriver Center. I am a practicing attorney. Prior to coming to Shriver, I actually worked at the Mississippi Center for Justice, where I did educational advocacy. While I was at the Center for Justice, I was a part of the very first Racial Justice Institute back in 2014 and was completely transformed as a consequence of that. After completing the Institute, I became a part of the network, and that's when I started serving as faculty on the advisory committee. I was a coach for teams, and then eventually came to this position as the director of the Institute. So I believe in it because I am a product of it. So I want to thank you guys for being here today as well. And I'm going to popcorn it to Terrence.
All right, popcorn it. Thanks, Kim. Hello, all. I'm Terrence O'Neill. I'm the Director of Online Learning here at the Shriver Center. And I met Kim at the 2014 RJI, so it's great that she's now the director. And it's great to see all your faces here. And my role is basically I kind of work behind the scenes on the course site and helping out with the live sessions. So welcome, and hope to work with you. And I guess I'll pass it to Ellen, there you are. Okay, on the next screen. Yeah.
Hi there, welcome everybody. My name is Ellen Hemley. I'm the Vice President of Advocate Resources and Training, and I'm very excited to be joining you all as we get ready for the 8th annual RJI. And I join you today from Boston, where I work from my home. And did we do Maddie and Chloe yet? So how about Chloe?
Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, calling from Vancouver. I'm an intern with the Shriver Center, and I'm currently a second year at the University of Chicago studying public policy. Yeah, I'll popcorn to Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm currently in Chicago, and along with Chloe, I'm an intern in the Advocate Resources and Training program at the Shriver Center, and I'm currently a junior at the University of Chicago. And then, do I just popcorn to anyone?
Hey, Maddie, thank you. Yeah, is Henry on the line with us today? I don't think I've seen him pop in. All right, well, we will keep it moving with our introductions because we definitely want to take time to hear from all of you. So I am sharing in the chat pod right now a Jamboard that we're going to use during this session. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with this platform, but I'm going to share my screen and show you how to use this today. Sorry. So if you could click the link in the chat pod, I see many of you are now joining me in this document. Basically, if you just go to the top of the screen and cursor over to the right using this right-hand arrow to go to the second frame, just going to ask that you all respond to the prompts in the background here by undocking, post-it, a sticky, whatever you want to call it. I'm sort of cursoring over it now. It's on the left-hand side in this stack of icons, fourth down. If you click there, you will undock a sticky note and you can share with us your name, pronouns, title, organization, city, state, but also looking to hear what you all are hoping to learn more about today. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and allow you some time to populate this. All right, starting to get some stickies here. Thanks for the support, Kim. They're all kind of stacking up. So I see we are joined by Gabby Rodriguez, supervising attorney, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, looking to learn more about the Institute and time commitment. Yes, we will definitely cover that. So thanks for that. And then Sarah Lynch, she, her, hers, staff attorney, Community Legal Services of Philadelphia, hoping to learn more about building community, power skills, and perspective through this network and how I can get involved. Well, we'll definitely share how you can get involved. Thanks for that. These are great. Thanks for sharing all of these. Obviously, I won't be able to go through all of them, but I think this will definitely help us shape the discussion. And then Deb, Virginia Helden, supervising attorney, got a lot of folks from Pennsylvania. This is great. Farm Worker Project, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, hoping to learn more about the content of the program. Yep, we'll definitely cover that. And then I will read one more, trying to find somebody who's not from Philly. Let's go to the West Coast. Let's see. Annalisa Chung, she, her, CEO of Dependency Advocacy Center, San Jose, California. I'm hoping to learn about your programs and bringing meaningful DEI work to my organization. That's great. Thanks so much, Annalisa. I think we will address that in our presentation, and you will likely hear that reflected in the experience of the alumni who have joined us today. All right, so keep these coming. This is great. We will try to kind of pivot back here when either Kim or I are not presenting so that we can kind of take a look at what you were hoping to hear more about. But definitely want to get us going today so that we can start to respond to some of the things we've heard people want to hear about during today's presentation. I want to give a shout out to my art colleagues for joining me and introducing themselves. Thanks for doing that. So I want to start today with a little bit of information and background about the Shriver Center on Poverty Law. We are headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. The art team, my team, works remotely. Our advocates fight for economic and racial justice by litigating, shaping policy, and training other advocates through programs like the Racial Justice Institute. The Racial Justice Institute is housed within the Shriver Center's art department. You just heard from all of us via webcam. ART stands for Advocate Resources and Training, just to flesh out that acronym. And ART's programs are built on these 4 principles for effective advocacy: racial justice, community power, affirmative advocacy, and leadership development. I'm actually going to pass it to Kim now to get us started.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start by sort of setting the context of the discussions that we're having in the Institute now, of how the world is ever changing these days, and particularly how the world is ever changing as it relates to race, because that really impacts the way in which we look at our work, and even sometimes make us reassess how we should be doing our work. And that's the whole purpose of the Institute, is to work with folks who primarily do poverty law or anti-poverty work, and help them understand the intersection of race and poverty, but also the importance of doing anti-poverty work with a racial equity lens. Was crazy. And one of the things that just really made it sort of, that started it off was COVID. And really quickly, when the discussion around COVID was had, for the first time, people were just talking about the inequities that existed around the people who were getting the virus. Why are people of color dying at such a high rate when they are not the large percentage of the population? Why are people of color contracting it at a high rate? And so as the data was being collected and we saw that change, and before we could just really grasp what was happening with COVID, then came the killing of George Floyd. And so much has happened since George Floyd, but we have to sort of acknowledge that George Floyd's death was a pivotal moment where folks then, regardless of COVID, sort of took to the streets and started this new movement. What happened to George Floyd, I want to acknowledge, is not new. It's been going on for centuries, for as long as we know, but this is the first time we've gotten such a powerful response and such a powerful reaction. Next slide, Jay. Generic. Thank you. And as such, we saw a movement afoot, and we saw players sort of jump into this field that had never done so before. We had corporations like Starbucks, football teams really assessing mascots, people really getting behind Black Lives Matter, which up to this point, they were like the enemy of the movement. Folks are were taking the knee and lost his job as a consequence and haven't been back in the NFL ever since. And here in my home state of Mississippi, the changing a flag that had a Confederate emblem forever. This was the moment that finally even allowed our legislatures to say, it's enough and it's time to reimagine even a place like Mississippi. So we saw changes locally, regionally, and even nationally around a movement such as that. Next slide, Jay. I may have a delay, I'm sorry. And then more important than that, the discussion around race sort of expanded. We were using terms like equity, and these are important terms, but now folks were using stuff like anti-racist, which was something people had never said up to this point. And the book by Dr. Kendi became, of course, very popular, How to Be an Anti-Racist, as people were using these terms. People were putting out statements saying we're an anti-racist organization. And so they took it to a different level. And he really sort of drew that line in the sand in this book and just saying, differentiating what does it mean to be anti-racist and what does it mean to say that I'm not a racist versus actually being a racist. So he just really sort of put it all out there in a really simplistic way in terms of where do you stand, because a movement is happening and it's important that you know what side of the fence that you belong to. Next slide, Jay. And so that brings us to the work that we do. And why is that relevant to what we see? Well, for most of us in the work that we do, we represent clients, we advocate on behalf of communities, and oftentimes we see the disparities that exist around race in the communities that we work in. But the question is, how are we addressing those disparities that we see? Lots of organizations will say, you know, we represent clients of color, and as such, we are doing race equity advocacy. I beg to differ. Other organizations will say, you know, if we body, that includes people of color. So we're doing race equity advocacy. I beg to differ. Race equity advocacy really is when you are taking a more strategic approach and a direct approach to eliminate the racial disparities that you see, focusing on that rather than focusing on the general population. So with that, I really want to get an idea from you guys, you know, what race equity disparities have you seen, or inequities have you seen around race in the work that you do? And are we going back to the Jamboard, Jay?
We are.
Yes. So if you go back to the Jamboard on page 3, or if you don't feel comfortable using the Jamboard, or if you can't get to the Jamboard, feel free to put it in the chat pod. But, you know, just let me know what type of work do you do and what race equity or race inequities that you see in the work that you do. Race equity issues. What kind of work are you guys doing? I'm really be interested in sort of seeing that. So grab another sticky and let's see what we come up with. Policing, over policing and hiring. Okay. Inequities in disaster recovery, right, and wealth. I see reentry. Oh, they're all coming in at the same time. The overrepresentation of Black families in child welfare cases, right. We represent parents and children in child welfare system where families of color are disproportionately represented. Yes. So the child welfare system representing people for Social Security. I see the ways in which racism in healthcare, education, and the criminal justice system makes it hard for people to prove their case to get disability benefits, right? Is there some sort of inequity in terms of who gets disability? The bias of the people who are making the decisions, unemployment, housing, public benefits, healthcare, consumer protection. And somebody mentioned disaster relief, immigrant workers. So we have a really wide variety of the areas that we work in. Here comes the child welfare system again. Landlord tenant, right? Housing is a big one these days. A lack of Black and brown folks that work within the legal services community itself, right? So we're part of the system. And the disparities even exist within the systems that we work in, and even the work that we do as advocates. So that's a great one. Predatory lending. All right, so thank you guys. Just wanted to take a look at that, Jay, if we can pull the slides back up. All right. I think this is where you pick. Oh, and so the point is, when we see these inequities that exist, they really all correlate back to access to opportunity. And opportunity really, in having access to that, is what provides each individual and their families in our community, and it increases your well-being, right? The more education you can get, the better job you can get, the better house you can afford. You have access to better food because you live in a space where it's closer, right? Your grocery store isn't in the next town over, or is not 20 miles away, or the closest place to get food is not a convenience center. The importance of transportation so that you can even get to those good jobs. Having the ability to enter the justice system with representation when needed, and having a fair shot when you walk into that space. Having quality health care. And right now, communications is a big one, because our students, our kids are at home learning. Do they have the internet? Do they even have access? Do they have a laptop in order to be able to participate in classes? And even as we're trying to catch up as a nation and giving kids access, we've learned that there are just areas that the internet just doesn't even go to. They're driving buses by people's house to give them internet access. So communication, all these things are about access to opportunity. So ultimately the work that we do, whether that's housing, child welfare, is really increasing our families' access. Next slide, Jay. I think this is where you pick.
Thanks so much, Kim. Kim, I just turned my video off to hopefully give me a better internet connection, just FYI. So wanted to kind of start about sharing a bit about the Institute, and wanted to start with a bit of context about last year's cohort. So here is a collage of our 2020 cohort. And later on, you'll hear from one of our 2020 fellows who will share her experience with RJI. Wanted to highlight where they all came from and how they each sort of comprised the cohort. You know, as you see, each team was comprised of a single organizational team, but we do invite teams from multiple orgs who work together or want to work more closely together to become a part of one regional team who hope to tackle an RJ issue. And again, later on, you'll hear from a fellow who is also a part of a multi-organizational team who can share a little bit more about that experience with the Institute. This is a snapshot of our network to date from 2014, Kim's cohort, to 2020. This is where they all joined from. And as you can see, there are a few gaps that we hope to fill. So as such, just kind of want to spend a moment highlighting our 2021 recruitment priorities. You know, RJI is about pulling together diverse perspectives so that we can all learn from each other and aren't doing this work in silos. So here are some of the practice areas and other demographics we hope can join the conversation. Again, one thing we've learned through RJI is when you bring together diverse perspectives, you are better able to issue spot and find sustainable solutions to the challenges that we're facing. So for practice areas, hoping to bring in more folks who do health advocacy, sort of work in the criminal carceral context, who do environmental work, and people who work with elderly populations and Native populations. And hoping to bring more people into the discussion who are themselves men of color, Native, immigrant. So here are really the specific geographic gaps from the map that I shared earlier. So I won't read all of these, but do want to highlight that this doesn't mean that we don't want people from other states to apply. It just means that we would like to have fellows join from these particular states when they are a good fit for the Institute. So wanted to share our RJI core practices and kind of highlight what we discuss when we spend our time together. You know, and want to point out, we define these in detail within the application brochure on our website. But just to review a few, you know, we begin with the concept of structural racialization and 4 levels of racism, which helps us identify racism within the context of the institutions we work with, and even begin to think through potential interventions for that racism. That's layered on top of social cognition and implicit bias, which gives us a better understanding of our cognitive processes and helps us understand the ways bias erupts. And we address ways to mitigate that bias within our programs and within our work more broadly. We take a look at systems thinking, which helps us examine and understand how we might change outcomes to have a more positive impact on our clientele of color. Framing and communications helps us keep race front and center whenever we discuss our advocacy. People sometimes shy away from weaving race into conversations about their work. And we share a framework that helps you keep conversations about race on track to continue to affirm those racial justice dimensions of the work that you're doing. Leadership and organizational alignment, which gives us tools to advance a race equity agenda forward within our organizations. These are our RJI goals. And in a way, you can really kind of consider this a continuum. Advocates join us and experience a bit of a transformation in the way that they do race equity work. They take that back to their organizations and transform their organizational culture to make race equity a focus. That focus becomes a part of the approach with their community, and communities are more empowered to lead the effort and state their own goals and their own purpose. This builds momentum and capacity for additional successful race equity initiatives, which in turn kind of creates these pockets of networks and conversations around the country. And we're able to share those case examples through RJI and through the RJI network. Want to highlight our schedule. Because of COVID, 2021 will actually be our second fully online iteration. So everything you see here is going to take place via Adobe Connect or this platform, Zoom, and our course website. RJI is a big time commitment. And if you look at our application, question 8 asks if you're able to commit to our schedule and provides that schedule with an overall time estimate of how much time each of these parts will take. As you reflect on that schedule and time commitment, just ask that you think about what you may be able to shift to ensure that you can spend the time needed to really shape a sustainable race equity project and work as a part of your team. So that time frame really kind of layers well on top of this. RJI is built on a bit of an action learning model. And the entire time that you are in RJI, you will be doing independent readings, attending live sessions, applying what you are learning in small groups, some of which are facilitated by past fellows, which in turn just kind of gives you the strategic questions to ask when working with your equity teams and provides you with context to reach out to ask more questions as they arise. And throughout this experience, we hear from you, we hear from your coaches about how it's going, and we're able to kind of steer and shape our case examples and discussions to better match your team initiatives in the hopes that it helps you really be able to build a sustainable project that will last longer than the Institute itself. So again, for 2021, RJI is going to be fully online, and just wanted to share what you'll need to engage with RJI. Obviously, a strong internet signal is a must. There are also there's lots of interpersonal engagement. So you'll want to be able to just kind of sit in a space where you feel safe having conversations about race and sharing your perspective about issues. We do a lot of work on webcam, and it's really vital that you have one. And you'll also want a good headset so that you can hear clearly. We can hear you, and you can easily mute and unmute and add your voice to the conversation. And we are happy to provide some recommendations for you on webcams or headsets, and to help you troubleshoot any kind of tech issues that you may experience. But this is just sort of an initial guideline.
So one of the most difficult yet rewarding parts of the Institute are the equity team projects. As you are deciding who your team members will be, who you'll be working with, and you need to get together with those folks and have a discussion around what equity team project will we work on. Jay just previously showed you the action learning model. The way it works is you have this idea around a project that you want to work on. And as you go through the Institute, you're able to apply some of the concept, skills, and tools you'll learn to that project. So it just gives you a way of showing how to actually do this. Next slide, please, Jay. So components of an equity team project. I think where a lot of people go wrong on their applications as it relates to the equity team project, these are the 3 areas. So a successful equity team project or even proposal addresses racial disparities or disproportionate impact on communities of color in various areas of opportunity. People will describe the equity team projects and never mention any ideas around addressing racial inequities. And so it makes me pause when I'm reading the application, because that's the whole point of the Institute. So be sure that as you're developing your equity team projects, you're thinking about how are we going to do this project through a race equity lens. And it contains an explicit sort of strategy or approach to addressing that. So this is our issue, and this is how we're thinking right now. We're proposing to address that issue. And the strategy that you have in terms of addressing that issue needs to be directly related to the inequities that you see that you've named in your proposal or your project. Now, no one is going to hold you to the proposed project that you have considered, but it is important that you give us some idea of what you want to work on. Sometimes people get into the Institute and then they change, they it evolves, and that's okay. So no one's going to say, this is what you said you were going to do, so we're going to hold you to that. But you do have to have some sort of idea or proposal, because it has to be included in your application. Next slide, Jay. Projects can be either internal or external. And what I mean by that is the project can be external in the sense that it can be the advocacy or the work that you do through your organization. But some people want to work internally. I believe during the introduction, someone said they wanted to sort of expand their DEI capacity in the work that they're doing in their organization. So if you're fixing something internally within your organization, or you're working on that, there can be internal projects as well. Some teams would do both. They'll propose an external project, but also be working internally. There's no objection to that. But just wanted to point out that there were 2 different types of projects. What makes an equity team project successful? So someone asked the time question, and that's really critical. Oftentimes, and there's a letter that your ED signs that basically said, we're going to give this individual the time and space to engage in RJI. So it does take time to participate in RJI if you're going to get the full benefit of it. And so the question is, and one of the questions you have to answer in the application is, how are you going to change your schedule to be present for RJI, as well as participate in all of the meetings that you will do with your equity team and your coach to successfully, have a successful equity team project. I think the other thing you have to understand is you will not develop and implement an equity team project in the 6 or 7 months that we'll do the Institute. Successful race equity advocacy is an ongoing sort of long-term process. It may take you the 6 to 7 months of the Institute just to plan the project, and then implement. Rushing you, and everybody will move at their own schedule. But a successful project generally takes a lot of planning, and it's a long-term sort of endeavor. Successful projects, and we'll talk about the importance of community lawyering in the Institute, and will involve your colleagues at your organization, the communities that you work with, and sometimes even the directly impacted individuals, if you're lucky, who can bring insight and perspective to the project that you otherwise would not have. And so we like to see collaboration, if at all possible, on what you're proposing in your equity team project. And most importantly, you have to have buy-in from your organizational leaders and your other colleagues. People go through the Institute, and sort of like I told you, for me, it was very transformative, but then they go back to the organization, don't understand the experience that they've had, or don't understand the new knowledge base that exists, and so can't really get on board with what they're proposing. And sometimes even the leadership will push back when they come back to their organization, and now they're sort of ready to do this race equity advocacy. So if you're not joining the Institute and able to go back and do this with your work, this is not the space, because that's what our advocates do. And so it's really important that before you submit your application, that you understand and your organizational leaders understand that I'll need their support. You'll need their support in order to do this successfully, so that you don't, and hopefully have that sort of pushback once you've completed the institute. One of the greatest things about the Equity Team projects is that you'll get a coach. So you'll be able to work with someone who successfully does race equity advocacy, to be there as a support to help walk you through the development of your project, to answer your questions, to provide you resources. And Anna, I'm sure, will tell you, she's going to share with you about her project when she was in the Institute, the role that her coach played in making her project successful. And even after the Institute, she was able, you'll make these connections and relationships with folks that you can call on way past the Institute, that will still get on a plane and come to your state, post-COVID, of course, and do what's necessary so that you can be successful. So our coaches really do play a critical role in helping you be successful in your Equity Team projects. And I believe that's it for me, just sort of going over Equity Team projects. I'm going to turn it back to Jay so he can introduce you to our two fellows and they can share with you their experiences.
Yeah, so as we've mentioned, we asked some past fellows to join us today and just kind of share a little bit about their experience, just hoping they can share a bit about their team composition. And, as you all sort of embark on shaping your initiative, we just asked them to share an honest evolution of their Equity Team project and what RJI or network supports were helpful to them throughout that process. So stop sharing. Start the video back up. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. So I think we will start with Whitney Knox-Lee today.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, great. So my name is Whitney Knox-Lee. I am a supervising attorney at Georgia Legal Services Program. I use pronouns she, her, and hers. And I was a part of the COVID cohort, which is the 2020 cohort. We were interested in participating in RJI starting back to about 2018, and actually had initially reached out to Kim and Generic to find out more. I think we did come to the open house that year, maybe the next year, and ultimately decided that because of a lot of transition that was happening internally in our organization, that it wasn't a good year for us to apply. We knew that we would be losing key advocates. And also at that time, we were transitioning with a new executive director. So we decided it wasn't a good time, that we would table it until the following year. And then we did put together an application at the end of 2019. And at the time that we applied, COVID hadn't yet gotten to the United States. So we thought we would be participating in the more traditional RJI experience and planned accordingly in terms of the time that we set aside. And where I think that really, I guess how it impacted us was that instead of having that week, traditionally with RJI, there's like a week in Chicago, which I was looking forward to. It's a time that I felt like we would really be able to like focus on just this one thing, and get to know our cohorts and just really get in it. We didn't have the opportunity because it wasn't safe to travel. So instead, we had a series of online webinar sessions to kind of take place for the in-person. And that was difficult because it's just difficult in general, as I'm sure most people know by now, making sure that you're blocking out the right amount of time and not even being able to like leave your physical environment of your house or wherever it is that you're working. So in terms of like whether or not now is a good time for an organization to apply and the time commitment that you're looking at, I would keep those things in mind, that what is asked of you is to spend, several hours a week sometimes reading and participating in the RGI forums and webinars, and then also participating in your project, putting your project together. And there are definitely challenges in that, and I experienced challenges in that once my office moved from going in office, because I think when we started RJI, we still were working in the office, and then at some point we transitioned to working from home. And of course, I had kids that were home with me, and so just consider all of that. And in fact, one of my children will probably be joining me shortly because he's home because of COVID with the daycare and all this stuff, and trying to plan schedules with my husband, and we have a conflict. So this is the exact type of thing that I'm talking about, where it can be a difficulty. But anyways, moving on. Our project wound up being on housing for justice involved persons. And what I want to say about that is the tool that Generic was talking about framing and communications, is a tool that we are constantly using at Georgia Legal Services, because our project is really, the goal of it is to alleviate the barriers that ex-offenders of color experience when they're trying to find housing. But the way that we often communicate about it, we don't often highlight that we are actually just talking about people of color. I mean, we care about all people, but we're talking about people of color with our project. Like our goal is to target Black and Brown people who are formerly justice involved and who can't find housing because of crime-free housing ordinances. And so even when we're working as a team, and when we're working to get buy-in from both people inside the organization and outside the organization, we're having to remind ourselves that we are wanting to be very specific and particular about the language that we're using to ensure that people know that this is a racial justice initiative. It's not just our regular legal services we care about poor people initiative. It is for people of color. And so that has been a tool that we continue to use and continue to think about as we move forward. And so my organization actually had a process through which we would decide what our project was going to be prior to applying to RJI. We had a request for proposals, and anyone within my organization who was interested in racial justice work, whether or not they could give the time commitment for participating in RJI, they were able to come up with a proposal. And we essentially took some of the questions from the RJI application, sent it out to all staff, and gave them a timeline to which to respond. From that, we had 3 very detailed proposals, one dealing with internal advocacy and organizational alignment, one dealing with this housing issue for previously justice involved people of color, and then one proposal on disaster relief and disparities around disaster relief. And we have an internal race equity committee that ultimately the person was able to present their proposal at a committee meeting. Summaries of those proposals were then sent to all staff, and all staff voted on which proposal we would send as our RJI application for the project. And so that's how we wound up on our project, and it wound up being pretty detailed, which was great for us once we kind of jumped into it, because we had done the brainstorming beforehand in terms of the logistics, the timing, and what we had hoped to see as an outcome for our project. We are definitely still working on our project because RJI just wrapped up in October. We are in the process of working with, so the project is going to be out of Savannah, initially Savannah, Georgia, and then it will be a statewide project, but our pilot is going to be in Savannah. And we're working with elected officials in Savannah to come up with different fair chance housing ordinances. But then we'll also have a component of our project that will be interviewing people impacted by these crime-free housing ordinances and rules to learn exactly what it is and where geographically people are experiencing these issues so that we can then target those issues moving forward. And so that's what we're up to right now. I did want to talk about what it was like going through RJI during the summer, where there was a lot of unrest and outrage around the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others. It was really difficult, especially being a Black woman, just personally dealing with those murders. And it was amazing being able to come into the room up with RJI fellows to be able to unpack and break down, you know, what we were all feeling and thinking, and then be able to talk about actual tools that we can use to address this kind of injustice as we move forward in our work. That was really empowering and inspiring and really provided a safe space. And I'll say even now, one of the benefits of going to RJI and being a fellow is the RJI network, which is right now takes the form of a very active listserv where people are constantly communicating about what's happening, what we're doing, you know, resources that may or may not be available. I know that I received a resource from the listserv about, I was looking for folks who dealt with trauma-informed advocacy and coping skills, because my organization being in Georgia and being in the place where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, we were looking for support for our staff and for our clients. And so I was able to reach out to RJI and got several contacts that I reached out to, and we are able to receive services through that connection. So I'm really grateful for that as well. I want to say some of the skills and concepts that we learned in RJI that we're still using. Generic, I time myself, so I know I got to stop soon. But some of those skills, the data mapping has been something that we loved learning about and are using that as we move forward. I spoke earlier about us gathering information from formerly justice involved people of color. We want to know where you've applied for housing, why they said that they weren't going to let you or accept your application. You know, did they have a written policy, or did they just tell you verbally? Did you have an opportunity to appeal that decision? We want to be able to track where that property was, who the property management company was, what kind of subsidy that housing complex, where that housing complex received, or if they were private. And so we're able to put all that information into maps so that we can better target our efforts. So that's definitely one thing. And then also a big thing for me, and a reason why I wanted to go to RJI, was to learn more language to use when I'm seeing all these things happening and I don't know the word for it. So I don't know how, you know, I think my advocacy can kind of be fumbled a little bit because I don't always know the language and the terminology that needs to be used. And I learned a lot at RJI about just the name, that what I'm seeing has a name, that structuralized racism is a thing, that I'm not making it up in my head, that it actually exists. And that, you know, we're learning about it, we're talking about it, and there are people that are trying to combat it directly. So I think those are the key points that I wanted to leave you all with, but I will be sticking around to answer questions about our project and our experience. But apply, yay.
Well, thank you so much, Whitney. And now we're going to pivot to Anna, who's going to share a little bit about her experience with the Michigan team. While Anna's unmuting, I want to respond to a question I keep getting in the chat pod. We're definitely going to share these slides with everybody after the webinar. I'll send a link to the recording and a PDF of these slides.
Hey everybody, I'm Anna Moss. I'm the supervising attorney for the Battle Creek Office of Legal Services of South Central Michigan. She, her, hers. And I attended RJI in 2017. And I loved hearing Whitney's experience just because it was different from mine and valuable in different ways and some of the same ways. Two of the same ways that really stuck out to me that I want to start with is first of all, the resource of the listserv. I'm not very active on the listserv as a throwing things out there, but it's probably the only listserv that I'm on that I actually read all the messages that come through because they're often extremely helpful and have really valuable resources. And the other thing Whitney mentioned that resonated with me was being part of a community where you're really in the same mindset as so many of the other people. It's a very, I guess comforting is the best word. I can't quite think of the right word, but being in with a group of people who you share the same, some of the same goals with is really nice, especially right now. I want to talk about my project. I don't know about you all, but before I went to Institute, I understood it all really well in the abstract, but when it came to thinking about the actual project, it was hard to think about what it would actually look like. So my team is, and I'm using present tense because our project is very much ongoing. My team is made up of multi-organizational. There's 7 individuals and we represent 6 different organizations across the state of Michigan. Initially, we were picturing setting up basically a statewide task force to facilitate people providing legal services through a racial justice lens. And once we got to Institute and as we made our way through it, we had this moment where we were like, what does that actually look like? Like, do we have a mortgage foreclosure task force and a housing task force, but I don't think you can quite cram a race equity task force into that same model. And what we realized as we were trying to think through the steps of our project was that if we wanted to have a statewide task force, what we had to do first was become race equity trainers. And this is what Kim was referencing a little bit. We relied heavily on our coach, Bill Kennedy, and we realized we needed to train the people in our state who provide legal services on how to apply a race equity lens. And to do that, we needed to figure out how to be good trainers. It's one thing to go through the Institute and understand all these concepts and be able to use framing, but then to train others, it seemed like another layer that we needed help with. And Bill helped us immensely. He came and he did a training, he gave us materials, and he has continued to provide support as we have trainings and we need a little help organizing it or we aren't sure which slides we should use. We always contact him for help. So at this point, what we've turned into is kind of a resource center for the state of Michigan for providing race equity training, how to provide legal services through a race equity lens to different legal services organizations. I believe among the 7 of us, we have managed to provide a training to all but one of the legal service offices in the state. We've trained the state appellate defender's office, different sections of the Michigan bar. We're pretty out there providing the training. And as we work our way through the training, I feel like our project is going to evolve again, because as we get more capacity with more people across the state trained, I feel like our project will gain momentum and potential to become something new again. So if you'd asked me in 2017 if I thought our project would look like this, I would say absolutely not. And if you ask me now if our project has been successful, I would also say absolutely. So it's not what we expected, but it's a really good thing at this point. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure everybody on my team also has an internal project. And I noticed in the first Jamboard, a lot of people were saying things about how to move their organization forward. And I feel like this is something that's gone well at my organization. I will begin by saying, though, that we have an ED who's very supportive and wanted us moving in this direction anyhow. So our statement of priorities, as long as I've been here, which is, I don't know how long, several years, a long time. Our statement of priorities has always included that one of our goals is to eradicate systemic racism. So that's always been like on paper, but there's a big difference between having that in your statement of priorities and also working towards it in a real way in your work that you do and in the culture of your workplace. So we formed a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And there's two of us from my team are within the LSC portion of my organization, and then a third member is on the non-LSC side. So the three of us formed our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And the way we modeled it has worked very well. Every field office has a representative who's on the committee. And that representative reports back to their field office and also communicates from the field office to the committee. And we've done things like, the best example is the committee rewrote guidelines and suggestions and policies for recruiting new hires, interviewing hires, resume review, the interview questions, all of that. We did a whole guideline, examples, there's appendices, and throughout the course, each of the representatives on the committee would take back the portion we'd done to their office, get feedback, bring it back to the committee. So by the time that document went to our central administration for approval, everybody in our office, in our organization, has had an opportunity to review it and provide feedback. And for us, that has really worked well for buy-in and for kind of creating a critical mass of support for the work we're doing. For us, that model's worked really well, and I recommend it. And I feel like having this committee, also we do more, all our projects aren't really big. One of the other things we do is help each of the representatives keep the race conversation happening in their own office. Like, we try to have fairly regular, what we call CARE, which is conversations about race equity in each of the field offices, and the committee is here to help the individual offices figure out how to manage those conversations. And then finally, something that Whitney said that also has worked in my experience is how RJI gave each of our team members the tools, and for myself, I would say the confidence to be able to speak about race and push back or for certain things as they happen. When George Floyd was killed, a member of our team was able to be the person to write the statement for all the legal aid organizations in Michigan, which was really helpful. And our committee was able to be active in keeping conversations going within my own organization. And I think we were able to do that because of what we got from Institute. So generic, I was timing myself too, so I need to stop. And I just encourage, I'm just really excited for all of you to be able to tap into this community and network.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. And we were actually able to insert a little wiggle room and time for you all to ask a question or two of Anna and Whitney. I'm sure you all have a lot of thoughts percolating. I just want to provide space for you to ask any fresh questions to them. There's also space at the end. Oh, go ahead. Who's speaking?
So my name is Teresa Coney. I am I work for CPCS, which is the Public Defender's Office in Massachusetts. And I am their new racial equity trainer. So probably about a year ago, they got their first diversity and inclusion director for the state of Massachusetts Public Defender's Office. And then this year, they decided to have post a position and hire somebody for my position, which is the racial equity trainer. So I'm sitting here listening to what the projects are, and like my responsibility is to train the entire state of Massachusetts Defense Bar to become anti-racist and to litigate in a way that impacts the racial disparity that affects all of our systems: child welfare, criminal justice, mental health, like literally everything. I'm just feeling like overwhelmed about how I fit that in a project. Help.
That's a big one. Yeah, I guess I would invite any of my my co-panelists today to chime in also. I mean, it may be about taking small bites though. Like maybe your race equity project that you apply to the Institute with isn't, training the whole state of Massachusetts who work for this organization so much as it's about like maybe creating some sort of pilot program within one office or one department, or do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of like, is there some sort of way that you can scale it back so that it's not so overwhelming, so that you don't have to think through so many factors as you are not only coming up with the project, but as you are sharing with your coach and the other strategic planners that you're going to work with during the Institute about like who the stakeholders are and where they fit within the organization. And because it can't really always be everybody. Oh, go ahead,
and
Kim.
I think you should, I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity. So the question is like, what direction do you want to move in? I think you can use this space to plan out your plan of action. Like, how am I going to train all these people? What do they need to know or learn? And I think what the Institute would bring is like, Whitney said, language. A lot of people don't even have the language to talk about what they see. Concepts that they need to understand. Like, people get implicit bias, right? But people don't necessarily understand what you mean when you say structural racialization. I don't understand the 4 levels and those things that you'll learn. So I think you'll find some ideas around things that you want them to know and learn. And then the question for you then, Teresa, would be, how do I take what I just learned, this idea around structural racialization, and incorporate that into what these defenders do? So I think it'll be a give and a take. It'll be you learning these different concepts and stuff, and while doing that, also thinking through, how do I apply this to what everybody else needs to learn? So it could be that project if you're thinking about it on a training level, or you can just dive even deeper and say, have access to all of these defenders. Maybe me and some of these defenders can think of something like Jeanette was saying, drill down. And if that's the child welfare system, we want to tackle the way in which parents are identified for abuse and neglect, or so it can be something where you drill down a little deeper, or it can be something as big as me just planning out how the basic training that all defenders need to know. So I would invite you to sort of grapple with that and figure it out. But I think it could be very powerful for you to do that in conjunction with someone who actually does the work. You know what I'm saying? A defender or something. So you have to think through like who makes the most sense for my team as well. But I think it's a great opportunity. And we also have the Brooklyn Defenders Services as one of our previous cohorts. They've done it twice. And if you want us to sort of connect you to them, they may be able to get you some ideas as well, because they're a defender service who went through this. So just shoot us an email and we'll make the connect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, as I mentioned, we have time at the end for questions also. And Kim, maybe this is a good pivot to talking about the supports that the network can provide, including the organizational alignment.
Jay's going to share his screen and pull up the slides for us. But, you know, we talk a lot about the Institute, but the real work sort of happens post-Institute. So we just want to give you some ideas of sort of what the resources and support that the network provides through the Institute. This is a convening that we had. I think it was June 2018. We did this convening in Chicago, and these are cohort members from all the previous years sort of came back together to join in this convening. Or maybe this was a cohort. I don't remember, but I believe this was a convening. But so I want to talk about CORE, which is Connections on Race Equity. It's an online platform that the network has that has a profile for each of our individual members that also sort of designates, what are you working in housing? Are you working in education? And then, as I just previously mentioned, we do convenings. We have a listserv. I think some people have mentioned a listserv. We do a newsletter giving people ideas, but we're really just showing all of these great success stories of our cohort members who have been using these tools. We have ongoing learning sessions. We're right now planning a session around what does it mean to be an abolitionist organization. That was a big conversation that had been happening on the listserv. And so that's where we get our ideas from. So now we're bringing that to our cohort members. And then we have working groups. Right now we have a working group around education, around organizational alignment, and around child welfare. So there's a specific child welfare working group. I saw several people who did that work where people get together and sort of drill down on specific topics. Next slide, Jay. Yes, so I just talked about the online platform, and this is just like a snapshot of a part. The beauty of the online platform is, in addition to all of our cohort members having individual profiles, it's also where we store all of this information. So if there's a session, you can get a recording from that session. If there were any resources or materials, they exist there. Folks can have conversations on CORE. They can share resources. People, they'll call me all the time, Kim, where is that so-and-so that we had? And I'm like, go to CORE. It's on the website. And so CORE is just sort of our repository of all of our resources associated with the Institute. I was talking about working groups. This is just a sample of one of our working group sessions that we held on child welfare. And this one was about the Missouri's Preserving African-American Families bill. So they were proposing this bill around the preservation of African-American families. And so we had speakers that were going to speak to this. So this is just an example of one of our working group sessions that we have. Convenings, I talked about that. So we started doing these annual convenings in 2018. So you can see the folks from the very first one at the top. And then in 2019, we went to Louisiana and had our convening in New Orleans because it was just cold. I was not going to bring anybody to Chicago in February. So we decided to do it, and we had such a great time. Oh my God. So Louisiana was great. You can just see some of the people just participating in the various convenings. Of course, COVID stopped 2020, and we probably won't be able to do a convening in 2021 unless we do it online. So we're really looking forward to, and Whitney, you can look forward to, post-COVID, having another convening where those cohorts that were not able to meet can now come together, as well as they can now sort of merge with previous cohorts as well. And now I'll pass it back to Jay.
Thank you. Yeah, so we wanted to take a moment to share this video with you, which was actually filmed at our 2018 convening that Kim just mentioned. Just saw this as a bit of another opportunity to share with you all from our fellows' perspective what RJI is all about. We just consider our fellows to be our greatest ambassadors. And just wanted to share this with you. So hold on one moment.
The Racial Justice Institute is a collective of attorneys from across the nation. What makes us unique is that we take more of a legal approach, understanding that that legal approach can only be successful if it's done with the community.
You take this huge problem, which is like racism, which, how do you really begin to combat that?
and really like sit down with a piece of paper with a problem in the middle with all of these different arrows. And it's like, all right, I'm going to look at these like 4 dynamics and think about like, who are the actors in these systems? Like, what's your local tipping point? Like, who are going to be your partners in making sure that we are uplifting people of color?
For me, being part of the Racial Justice Institute, it's a very hopeful space. A lot of people are in this moment where they're really questioning, like, what are the right strategies?
Because there are so many of us now who've graduated from different cohorts across the entire country in different practice areas, we're able to connect with each other and communicate about the work that we're doing. And so we can find more opportunities for intersectional work.
He has given me a set of tools that have just sharpened my race equity work, but really my work as a legal services attorney.
And so for me, even though it's an incredibly challenging place, the more challenging thing, for me is when you're doing just one individual case after the other.
Being a community lawyer means learning when to listen.
So you really have to suspend that lawyer hero ideal.
It is so important to acknowledge your own implicit bias when you are doing this work.
I have peers that I look up to and contact on a regular basis. I have people to call if I have challenges.
So there's no better time to engage in race equity work or race justice work than today, because people are paying attention.
It can be very easy to get stressed out and bogged down by the work that you're doing. It feels like there are crises happening every single day, and sometimes you wonder, what difference does my work in one case matter when everyone else is still going to be suffering and everyone else is still going to be affected by these really racist policies? So by being able to look at it through a bigger picture lens, I'm able to see the value of my work.
The work is really hard. It's hard to see inequities and the effect that they have on people in really disenfranchised and marginalized groups. And so it's really difficult to do it every day and to still keep having passion about it and still being able to give to your clients. And so talking to people who get it and who support you is really meaningful.
So we're creating a space where when we feel the most hopeless, we can come together, just be with each other and encourage one another and continue that shared understanding that we do have the tools to fight this, and we will.
We are the movement.
We are strong together.
We are unapologetic about addressing race.
We're the movement.
We are the movement.
We are the movement.
All right. Thank you for indulging us and hearing from our extended RJI family. Now want to just open it up for questions. Teresa kind of kicked us off asking questions via our microphones, so we're happy to do that. If you are more comfortable entering them in Jamboard, I'm happy to take a look there. But also, if you can't access Jamboard, you can put them into the chat pod here. And I guess just a note on Jamboard, questions are going on the 4th frame. If we could start a new space there for questions. If you could just undock a sticky or a Post-it, whatever you want to call it, pick out a festive color and share your question with us. And while people are typing, just want to mention again that I will share these slides with you all, as well as a recording of this session once we are done. I'll just send it to everybody who registered.
Well, while the questions are, well, here comes a question. It says, do you recommend that our organization think about the project and plan the application a year in advance? I'm assuming that the question means, should we take a year to think about it? I mean, you'll have to decide whether it takes that long. Generally, we do this every year and folks are able to that's why we drop the application at the beginning of January and give folks to the end of February. So it's almost like 60 days to think about it. But, like Whitney said, if by the time you review the application and you pull your team together and you're preparing for the application, you decide that maybe this isn't the best year, or you want additional time to plan, No one is asking you to execute the project. We just want to know what your idea is. We want to know that you've thought about this and you have some idea around what you may want to do. So no one is making you commit to that. Part of the process is evolving and changing. So I don't think it takes a year, but ultimately that's a question you'll have to sort of answer. How do you go about forming your RJI team? Wanting some insight on how to go about it. Anna, do you or Whitney may want to share how you decided? How did you, Anna, decide to form a team with 6 different organizations?
I do not know how I got so lucky to land on this team with all these great people. But I believe what happened is there's one person on our team who's the director of her section, and she had networked with other people at different organizations, and she's already active statewide. So we kind of had some infrastructure built in. But I do think you want to make sure you have people of a similar commitment level. I think it'd be pretty hard to manage. Like our team's pretty much all in. And obviously we understand when somebody can't give as much as usual, but I think it'd be pretty stressful on the project if you had different commitment levels.
Yeah. Whitney, did you want to add anything? Oh, go ahead, Anna. Were you going to add something else?
I was just going to say, it was nice when we did our project, people were at different, like, I guess, levels, for lack of a better word, in their organizations. And for better or worse, at this point, nobody is any longer at a staff level. We've all moved up. And I do think it's nice when you have people at different levels.
Yeah, that's a great point that Anna just made. So I think one of the things you'll see in the application is it's really important, first of all, that your team is diverse. So we do look for diverse teams. And that is diversity around race, around ethnicity. You want to know that your team is diverse. Homogenous teams don't make the best projects. We find with different perspectives is important. The other thing is, I think your team selection members need to correlate with your project. So if you're doing a particular project, we found to be a successful project, it has to be folks who want to do that project. So if you select 3 team members, for instance, somebody's working in education, somebody's working in housing, somebody's working in reentry, but it's ended up being a housing project. If the reentry person can't see their plugin, which they could because they are connected, but if the project doesn't connect those two, or doesn't connect education, reentry, then usually those members fall off. They don't have as much interest in seeing the project through because it's not the area that they work in. So the best projects are ones that you're either doing now and you like, we want to do this with a race equity lens, or projects where you like, I keep seeing this in equity in the work that I do. It's something that's just been nagging me that I would love to address, but I haven't had the opportunity to do so. The team members should reflect your project, people who can help you with that. And I just want to also point out that everybody on your team does not have to be an attorney. You can select folks in your organization who, again, work collectively with you to get that done, or it can be a community-based organization that you work with, or it can be a directly impacted person that is an advocate in your community that works with. Those make the best teams. But I believe somebody was going to ask a question. Was that the baby? He was going to ask me something.
Yeah.
I think I heard him.
But I wanted to add that at Legal Services, we also had an application process for team members. So after we decided on the project through voting, we made sure that everybody knew what the project was, what the time commitment was, and then did a call for applications to be a part of the team. And as part of that application, you had to have already had a conversation with your direct supervisor about the time commitment and basically gotten their approval. And my team did end up being myself, a supervisor. We had a non-attorney housing navigator through the VLAN grant, and then a fellow, I can't remember which fellowship she was a part of, but she was a fellow, and then actually during RJI transitioned to a staff attorney.
Yeah, and Whitney brought up a great point. Also, diverse teams includes diversity and positional authority. So we don't want everybody from the leadership level. You know, we don't want everybody from mid-level, and we don't want everyone from like a staff attorney level. A mix is great. And the beauty of that is someone who has positional authority can really be someone who can be a champion for the work that you do when you go back to your organization. It really sort of helps with that whole pushback some of our members get sometimes when they return to their organization. So cute.
I also wanted to add really quick, our Georgia Legal Services has 12 offices throughout the state. And so our application to participate was open to anyone in those offices. And it wound up being that there were 2 people from my office and then 1 person from the Savannah office that were on the team.
Yeah. So it sounds like Whitney had a pretty intricate process for both selecting members, but getting the applications in, and they were able to do all of that within the time frame to get their application in. So I do think it's doable. But again, everyone has to know it's the right time for them. I don't see any more questions. Last call for questions. And while we're calling for questions, Jay, if you want to pull up the slide that sort of goes through the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Generic told you guys previously was just that, there's a link on the brochure that takes you to the schedule, and it gives you some details around how much time each aspect of the Institute will take. And that'll be really important. It also gives you the dates that you'll need to know now, so you can see if there's any major conflicts in terms of when we meet, when we have these sessions. Generic?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kim. Yeah, we just kind of wanted to give you the sort of broad stroke highlights of timing for the application. As we mentioned, we normally drop it around the beginning of the year to give you about 60 days to kind of formulate and submit your application. So as such, the application deadline itself is February 26th. In March, we will convene our selection committee and begin to review the applications and start to score them and make decisions about who's going to join us for next year. March 26th, we'll begin to send out notifications about who's been accepted to join the Institute. And then, April 2nd is our confirmation deadline. And that's when we want to have your, headshots, bios, and your payment in hand. So just be mindful that that's kind of a tight timeline. So if you do submit an application, in between submitting the application and kind of waiting to see if you've been accepted, I think you want to be in touch with your organization about how you're going to pay to join us. It's $2,500 per person. So, do you have an organizational credit card to use? Are you going to have to send a check? Just kind of be thinking about those things. And then
I just want to answer a question really quick that was in the chat pod about single member teams. This comes up quite a bit. And even with this informational session, people still do it. You can do it, Chris. We do not, based on the way that the Institute is formed, we do not take single member applications. Now we can take 2. So we have 2-member teams all the time, but we do not accept single member. So if you do submit a single application, then we have it, but it will not be considered, unfortunately. Keep trying, Chris. I know you can make it happen. All right.
Thanks, Kim. Just wanted to wrap by sharing our contact information. You should already have mine through the registration process. But again, I will be emailing each and every one of you afterwards with the recording of this session and slides. And we just want to let you know that you can be in touch with us if you have any additional questions. This isn't your last opportunity to ask us questions about the Institute, the application. If something comes up as you begin to kind of put together your team and think through what your project looks like, just invite you to reach out to us.
We have one more question, Jay. Teresa asks, do you keep a list of people in different geographical areas who are interested in forming teams? And I was thinking, unless they go to the application, there's no way for us to know that. The only thing that I could do, Teresa, is anyone who signed up for this informational session who was in your state, I could, because we are collecting states, right, Jay?
We are.
I could send you others who have signed up for this informational session or have shown any interest in RJI. We do have a list of that who come from your geographical area. If you want that, then shoot us an email and just ask us and we'll see what we can pull together for you. All right,
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, and then just wanted to wrap up by sharing some upcoming trainings. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, the art department helps shape leaders through our ongoing trainings. And so just kind of wanted to highlight that in March, we're going to be hosting community lawyering completely online. And then in June and July, that will be our next open iteration of supervision for quality and impact training. And I think that's about all I have. Last call for any questions.
Yeah, we only have a few moments left. If any, thank you guys for joining us. If you have any questions or want to jump on a call with me and Jennair, we do take calls and answer questions if necessary. You haven't, so just reach out. And if anybody has any additional questions, we're just gonna sit here for a minute and just in case. Otherwise, have a good evening.
Yeah. Shout out to Anna and Whitney.
Yes.
For always coming to give back.
You guys, you're rock stars. Appreciate it, ladies.